Hey guys, it's Milo back with another video, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to hang an axe. This is basically just putting a head onto an axe handle, and I'll be showing you guys like my process of doing it. This is really just personal preference. People do this differently, they use different tools, but I'll be talking a little bit about why I do it the way I do it. And I've actually never done an axe related tutorial before, or like a bushcraft related video. So this is going to be very new to me, and it's not going to be really high production quality like my other YouTube videos are, just because I don't really have time to post that much on my second channel. But what I'm going to be restoring is this 3.5 pound double bit Kelly Perfect, and it has a really nice patina on it, so I'm probably going to be polishing the phantom bevels, but that's it. And then I'm putting it on this 36-inch handle that I'm going to be slimming down to like a Puget. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's a really cool axe, and the lumberjacks used to have really thin handles on it, so that's what I'm going to be like shaping this handle to be like. And then it's also 36 inches. I'm going to be bringing it down to 30 inches because 36 is a bit too long for me. And then I have this softwood wedge right here, and it's really basic. It came with the axe handle. I actually am getting some, I think it's like black walnut, and that's apparently a good wood, so I'll be making my own wedges soon. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take my axe handle and put it into a vise. You can't really do this without like a vise or some kind of clamp, just because you just can't like carve it with one hand and then hold it in the other. You have to be able to use both hands while working on the axe. So I have it clamped into my vise right now. It's really sturdy. You can also use like some ratchet clamps. That would work, but that's not really ideal. So the first thing that I recommend doing is to just line up your axe head and put the eye up to the top of the handle, and then just take a pencil and kind of draw inside of the eye. And that's going to give you an outline of where the axe is, and then you'll be able to know how much wood you're going to need to take off. And I usually recommend taking off a bit too much. You want to slide the axe onto the handle with your hand, and then you want to hammer it at the bottom, and just a few taps is going to work, and you just want it to seat correctly. Because the wedge takes up 2/3 of the eye, that's going to lock the axe in place really well. So you don't really need to have it fit perfectly until you actually seat it with the hammer. There's a few tools that you usually want to use. You can use a rasp. This is a Japanese saw rasp. It's called a Shinto, and this thing is amazing. It's really aggressive, and it takes off a lot of material, and it also doesn't get jammed because there's holes inside of it. It's just really awesome. I like it a lot. And then you can use a more traditional rasp, which is like a four-sided, different like grit type of rasp. I actually bought this one yesterday, and it does work well. It's just better for like light work, not taking off a bunch of wood. Then you can use a spoke shave. These things are alright. It's kind of like a draw knife. You can also use a draw knife or a spoke shave. They're pretty much the same thing, just in a different form factor. And I feel like they kind of dig into the grain. You have to be really skilled to use these, so I probably wouldn't recommend them to somebody that's just learning. And then you can also use like a scraper, which scrapes off the wood, and I wouldn't recommend that because that doesn't take off a lot of wood. I would more so recommend that to thin down the axe handle. I'm now going to take my rasp and just start taking off the wood until I reach that line. And every like couple minutes, or maybe like 50 or 40 strokes, I don't really count, but when I feel like I've taken off enough wood, I just put the axe handle on with my hand and then see how it lines up. And if it doesn't line up properly, then I just take off more wood. So right now I managed to get the axe head horizontal because this is a double bit handle. If I wasn't able to get it horizontal because it's a curved single bit, then I could use ratchet clamps and clamp it to the table sideways. And I actually used my spoke shave instead of my draw knife just because the spoke shave is easier to control, and also the draw knife isn't like ground correctly, so it's not a perfect chisel shape. And right now the problem that I'm running into is actually starting the axe. Because I have these ridges, it's actually like catching on to the wood and it's not starting. So what you usually want to do if you're having that issue, or if your axe head is digging into the wood and creating curls, I recommend getting a file and just filing the inside of the eye and kind of like chamfering it so that it like compresses onto the axe handle instead of actually cutting into it. So I'm gonna be filing this right now so that the ridges like don't really stick out as much. So I've already done this step, but I'm just going to show you guys like how I did it. So basically, once you're done chamfering the edge of the axe head, like at the bottom of the eye so it compresses and not like dig in, then you want to put your axe head onto the handle and kind of like slide it down a bit, and then you want to flip it upside down and hammer it. So I'm about to show you guys me doing that. So right now I have my axe head in the handle, and I'm just sliding the head onto the axe handle like with my bare hands. And once I have it on kind of, I'm going to keep the axe upside down, and then I'm going to take a hammer, and then I'm going to grab the axe handle with one hand like this, and then hammer on the bottom, and my hand's going to slide up, and I'm going to reposition it and then continue doing that. So you can see my hand sliding, I just repositioned it, and I'm going to continue hammering until I start seeing curls on the axe. And the curl basically means the axe head is cutting into the wood. And once you see the curls, you're going to want to continue taking wood off of the axe head so it fits correctly. And a drift is basically a piece of wood or metal that's in the shape of the eye. And I'm going to want to put the drift back into the eye of the axe, and then put my axe head back in a vise, and then just hammer on the drift, and that's going to back the handle back off, and then you can continue shaving, and you'll be able to like continue like trying to drive the axe head down, and do this over and over and over again until the axe head is seated correctly. And right now I'm just going to demonstrate that. So as you can see, my axe head is on the handle, but there are curls down here, and I want to continue shaving that. So now I'm putting my axe head back into the vise, and I'm taking my drift, which is my piece of wood, putting that into the top, and then taking my hammer, and then just hammering that down until the handle slides back out. So my axe is sliding down in the vise, so I'm just going to try and tighten that a lot, just really crank on it. And there you go, as you can see it's sliding down, and it fell onto the floor. And now the handle's off, and you can see like right there. There's like the curls right here, and that's what you're going to want to remove. You don't really have to take off any material above that, because that material like is already fitted, so it's gonna work fine. And one thing that you want to keep in mind is that you want the axe head to have a gradual transition on the sides with wood, and that's so that you don't create something called a ninja shelf, which is basically where the axe cuts in and it like splits your axe handle. So I'm just going to make sure this transition is smooth, and also mark where my axe head is going to sit down. So I want this to sit down just above the shoulders, which is this part, and that's going to make it so I have more room to bring the axe head down if the handle ever gets loose. And then I also want to leave a bit of extra handle at the top so I can hang this proud, and that's so that the wedge is like above the axe head, and that kind of like locks it in place. Also make sure the kerf is 2/3 in the depth of the eye of the axe, so like if I have my axe head just above the shoulders, then it will be about 2/3, so I don't really have any issues there. So I'm just going to continue removing material, and then when I feel like I've removed enough, I'm just going to like re-hang the axe and try and get it down as far as I can. So I just managed to seat the axe, and as you can see, there is a bit of handle on top, and that's what I was talking about. That's called hanging it proud, and that is desirable. And I have this down on the shoulders enough, and there's no curls. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stick a chisel or a flathead screwdriver at the top of the wedge, and then I'm just going to kind of like press down on it and just spread the kerf a bit so that that cut is kind of wide open and it's not too compressed. And then I'm going to take my wedge, and I'm either going to cover in wood glue or boiled linseed oil. It is kind of controversial to cover your wedge in wood glue because then you can't pull the wedge back out and repair it if you need to. But I'm just going to use boiled linseed oil because it kind of acts like lubrication and it doesn't harden and stick like wood glue does. Also, this is a softwood wedge, so it's going to hold really well and it's not going to like slide out after I hammer it in. Okay, so I have my hammer. This is a ball peen hammer, and I have my wedge, which is covered in linseed oil. And usually you want to use a dead blow hammer or use a normal hammer with a piece of wood on top when you're hammering in the wedge. And that's so you don't accidentally break your wedge. But this ball peen hammer seems to work fine enough for me. And if your wedge cracks, it's not really an issue. For me, it always works perfectly fine. And it looks pretty appealing too. Okay, so I'm just starting to hammer it in right now, and at first I'm going to give it light taps, then I'm going to tap harder, and then I'm going to just tap as hard as I can until it basically cracks and I have it in all the way. Okay, so it's split in about 4 pieces right now because this is soft wood. And even if I used a board, this probably would have happened. And also, the wedge is going to want to slide back and forth depending on how tight it is on which part of the eye. And basically, if it starts to lean one way, then you just tap it flat. And then you continue tapping the part where it needs more pressure. I hammered it in, and it actually did split a lot. It kind of looks like a mess, but this shouldn't look bad once I saw down the wedge. It still will be slightly proud, but you just won't have all this mess at the top. So I'm just going to saw it off right now. I just finished doing a lot of sanding and it looks really nice now. There is a few imperfections because of how the wedge split, but you can't really see it at this point. So don't worry guys, if your wedge splits then it's not going to be a big deal. And right now I'm going to cover this in linseed oil and it's going to make it look really nice. You may see that the color does look different on this side, but that's because half of this is sapwood and the other half is heartwood. Also, the grain orientation is kind of bad on this handle, sadly, but overall the wedge did turn out pretty well. And you can always put in metal step wedges, but this is a really tight fit in my opinion, so I don't feel the need to do that. Also, you could put in like a dowel, and you can also cross wedge it, and you can put in like contrasty wedges like black walnut, and you can put shims in this if there's gaps in the handle. There's actually so many different things that you can do, and all of that is kind of complicated. If you want to learn all of the really like advanced parts, then I would recommend going on Axe Junkies, and those people are really good at restoring axes, and you'll learn a lot from them. And that's pretty much all I have for today's video. If you enjoyed it, then please feel free to like and subscribe. It means a lot to me, and peace out.